Blood dripped from Zara's fingers as she clutched the torn remains of her graduation gift, a designer hat her mother had given her. The flight attendant, Vanessa Morris, towered over the 16-year-old, snarling that ghetto accessories weren't allowed in first class. As tears streamed down Zara's face, the cabin door burst open. Jasmine Richardson, CEO of Transglobal Airlines, and Zara's mother stepped into the cabin, her eyes blazing with fury. "You just assaulted the daughter of the woman who signs your paychecks," she whispered. Vanessa's face turned ashen. How far would this flight attendant go to defend her racist actions? And what would happen when she discovered just how powerful her target really was? Before we dive into this shocking true story, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe in standing up against discrimination, hit that like and subscribe button to join our community fighting for justice. The morning of Zara Williams's high school graduation dawned bright and clear, filled with promise and excitement. The 16-year-old honor student had worked tirelessly for this moment, maintaining a perfect GPA while juggling extracurricular activities that would secure her spot at Columbia University. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror, Zara adjusted the tassel on her graduation cap, her heart swelling with pride. Her mother, Jasmine Richardson, knocked softly before entering, cradling a sleek designer box from Paris. "I have something special for you, baby girl," Jasmine said, her eyes glistening with tears of pride. Inside lay an exquisite designer hat, handcrafted by a renowned French milliner, with Zara's initials delicately embroidered along the band. Zara gasped, gently lifting the treasure from its nest of tissue paper. "Mom, it's beautiful, but this must have cost thousands." Jasmine wrapped her arms around her daughter, her voice thick with emotion. "Nothing is too good for my brilliant girl. I started as a flight attendant cleaning up after entitled passengers, and now I run the entire airline. You're going to soar even higher than I did." As the CEO of Transglobal Airlines, Jasmine Richardson had shattered countless glass ceilings, becoming the first Black woman to lead a major American carrier. Her journey from flight attendant to executive had been fraught with obstacles, prejudice, and endless microaggressions that she battled through with fierce determination. She had raised Zara to be equally resilient, preparing her for a world that would often judge her by the color of her skin rather than the content of her character. Their celebration breakfast was interrupted by Jasmine's phone, buzzing urgently. Richard Montgomery, chairman of Transglobal's board, was calling with an emergency. "Jasmine, we need you in New York immediately. There's a situation with the Asian Roots merger that could tank the whole deal." Jasmine's face fell as she ended the call. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I need to fly to New York right now. The board called an emergency meeting that I can't miss." Zara's shoulders slumped momentarily before she straightened them, just as her mother had taught her. "It's okay, Mom. I understand. This is important." Jasmine's mind raced as she packed her overnight bag. "You'll still walk across that stage and get your diploma, and I've arranged for you to fly to New York tonight on Transglobal Flight 1237. First class, of course." She handed Zara her own Platinum Airline credit card. "You can meet me at the plaza later tonight, and we'll celebrate properly." Zara's eyes widened. First class? By myself? This would be her first time flying alone, a milestone that both excited and slightly terrified her. Jasmine cupped her daughter's face in her hands, her expression suddenly serious. "Listen to me carefully, Zara. You're going to be flying on my airline, sitting in first class, and some people might not think you belong there." Her voice was firm but gentle, imparting a lesson she wished her daughter didn't need to learn. "Hold your head high. You have every right to be there. But remember, even with all our success, with my position, with your achievements, some people will only see one thing when they look at you." Zara nodded solemnly, understanding the unspoken truth that had shaped both their lives. "I know, Mom. I'll make you proud." Jasmine kissed her forehead. "You always do. Now pack that beautiful hat carefully, it's delicate." As Jasmine rushed to the airport for her emergency flight, Zara attended her graduation ceremony without her mother in the audience. She accepted her diploma with dignity, her chin held high despite the empty seat in the VIP section. Later that evening, dressed in a sophisticated navy blue dress that complemented her rich brown skin, Zara placed the designer hat carefully on her head, admiring how it framed her face perfectly. The car service her mother had arranged dropped her at the airport's first-class entrance, where she was greeted by name. "Ms. Williams, we've been expecting you. Your mother is a legend around here." The check-in agent handed her a boarding pass with a smile. "Enjoy your flight." Walking through the terminal with her carry-on luggage rolling behind her, Zara couldn't help but notice the double takes from other travelers. A black teenager in designer clothes wearing an obviously expensive hat wasn't what many expected to see in the first-class lounge. She kept her mother's words in mind, reminding herself that she belonged there just as much as anyone else. When the flight was called, Zara was among the first to board, stepping onto the plane with confidence despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. As she settled into her plush first-class seat, she texted her mother, "Boarding now. Miss you already. Can't wait to see you in NYC." She didn't notice the frowns from a few of her fellow first-class passengers, or the way the businessman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably when she sat down. What she did notice was the flash of surprise on the flight attendant's face when she approached Zara's seat, a momentary microaggression that Zara had learned to brush off. "This is going to be an amazing trip," she whispered to herself, running her fingers along the brim of her special hat, feeling connected to her mother, despite the distance between them. As the plane began filling with other passengers, Zara noticed the subtle shifts in body language from those around her. The middle-aged white woman who had the seat next to hers clutched her designer purse a little tighter. The businessman across the aisle, wearing an expensive suit with a gold Rolex peeking from beneath his cuff, angled his body away from her, as if proximity might somehow taint him. Zara kept her eyes on her phone, scrolling through congratulatory texts from friends, pretending not to notice when someone would do a double take at the sight of her in first class. She was used to these reactions, had been prepared for them by her mother's careful guidance throughout her life. "Don't let them see that it affects you," Jasmine had always advised. "Your dignity is your armor." The lead flight attendant, a tall, thin woman with bleached blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, approached Zara's row with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I believe you might be in the wrong cabin. Let me check your boarding pass." Zara looked up, meeting the flight attendant's gaze directly. The woman's name tag read, Vanessa Morris, lead flight attendant. With practiced politeness, Zara handed over her boarding pass. "I'm in the correct seat, thank you." Vanessa scanned the boarding pass, her eyebrows rising slightly as she saw the premium reservation code and the note that Zara was flying on an airline employee's benefits. "And whose benefits are you flying under?" she asked, her tone suggesting that Zara couldn't possibly be entitled to such luxury on her own merits. "My mother's," Zara replied evenly. "Jasmine Richardson." If Vanessa recognized the name of the airline's CEO, she gave no indication. Instead, she handed the boarding pass back with visible reluctance. "I'll need to see your ID as well." Zara provided her student ID, which Vanessa scrutinized with unnecessary thoroughness, before finally moving on without an apology for the extra verification that other first-class passengers hadn't been subjected to. From the corner of her eye, Zara noticed two other flight attendants watching the interaction. Trevor, a young black man who looked uncomfortable with his colleague's behavior, and Diana, who pretended to be busy with the galley setup while stealing glances at the situation. The businessman across the aisle, who Zara would later learn was Bradley Cooper, a shipping magnate with significant investments in competing airlines, leaned toward Vanessa as she passed. "Is there a problem with the seating arrangements?" he asked, loudly enough for Zara to hear. "I paid a premium for a peaceful business trip." The implication was clear, and Zara felt her cheeks burn with indignation. Vanessa gave him a conspiratorial smile. "I'll see what I can do, Mr. Cooper." As the boarding process continued, Zara remained composed, focusing on the excitement of seeing her mother in New York and celebrating her graduation properly. She placed her prized hat carefully in the overhead compartment, wanting to keep it pristine for their reunion. Once all passengers were seated, Vanessa returned to Zara's row. "We're completely full today," she announced, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "So unfortunately, we won't be able to make any seating changes." Bradley Cooper made a show of sighing dramatically before turning to stare out the window, as if Zara's mere presence had ruined his entire journey. The flight took off smoothly, and Zara tried to relax, selecting a movie on the in-flight entertainment system. When the seatbelt sign turned off, she stood to retrieve her hat from the overhead bin, wanting to take a photo with it to send to her mother. As she carefully lifted it out, Vanessa appeared at her side, carrying a tray of welcome drinks for the first-class cabin. What happened next occurred so quickly that Zara barely had time to react. Vanessa's arm accidentally bumped into Zara's, causing water to splash directly onto the designer hat. "Oh my," Vanessa said flatly, without a trace of genuine remorse. "You should be more careful about where you stand." Zara stood frozen, watching water seep into the delicate fabric of her graduation gift, the first direct act of aggression-making. Her mother's warnings crystallize into painful reality. The businessman, Bradley Cooper, didn't bother hiding his smirk. Would you have spoken up immediately if someone deliberately damaged your prized possession? Comment number 1 if you'd have called out the flight attendant on the spot, or number 2 if you'd have tried to handle it privately. And if you've ever experienced or witnessed this kind of treatment while traveling, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories exposing everyday injustices. As Zara stood there with her dripping hat, could she have imagined how this accident was just the first move in a calculated game designed to humiliate her? And what would happen when these airline employees discovered exactly whose daughter they were targeting? Zara clutched her dampened hat, desperately trying to blot the water with the single cocktail napkin Vanessa had carelessly tossed her way. The delicate designer fabric was already showing signs of water damage, and the carefully embroidered initials that had made the gift so personal began to bleed ink. "Excuse me," Zara called politely to Vanessa, who was now serving drinks to other first-class passengers with excessive friendliness. "Could I please have some more napkins?" Vanessa glanced over her shoulder, her expression cold. "We're in the middle of service. You'll have to wait." She then proceeded to spend an unnecessarily long time chatting with Bradley Cooper, laughing at his jokes while pointedly ignoring Zara's increasingly urgent request. A tap on Zara's shoulder startled her. "Here, dear," came a gentle voice. An elderly white woman with silver hair and kind eyes offered a packet of tissues. "I always carry extra. I'm Margaret, by the way." Zara accepted the tissues gratefully. "Thank you so much. I'm Zara." As she carefully dabbed at her hat, she explained its significance. "It was a graduation gift from my mother. It's one of a kind." Margaret frowned at Vanessa, who was still deliberately avoiding their row. "That was no accident," she whispered. "I saw how she bumped into you." Zara nodded, unsurprised but appreciative of the validation. "I'm used to it, unfortunately." A deep voice joined their conversation. "You shouldn't have to be." The man seated behind Zara had leaned forward. With a discreet motion, he flashed a credential that identified him as Marcus Johnson, an air marshal. "I noticed what happened. Do you want to file a complaint?" Zara hesitated, torn between standing up for herself and avoiding further confrontation. Before she could decide, the meal service began. Vanessa wheeled the cart down the aisle, offering each first-class passenger their pre-ordered meal with practiced charm. When she reached Bradley Cooper, she spent extra time ensuring his table was perfectly set, his wine glass filled to precisely the right level. Then she skipped Zara's row entirely, moving on to serve the passengers behind her. "Excuse me," Zara called out. "I think you missed me." Vanessa turned, her expression a mask of feigned innocence. "Oh, I thought you were sleeping. We try not to disturb resting passengers." This was an obvious lie, as Zara had been sitting upright, clearly awake and waiting for her meal. Marcus Johnson cleared his throat. "The young lady was clearly awake. I believe she'd like her meal now." Vanessa's smile tightened, but with the air marshal watching, she grudgingly returned to Zara's row. "What was your meal choice?" she asked coldly. "I ordered the chicken," Zara replied. Vanessa disappeared to the galley and returned with a tray that she practically dropped in front of Zara. The chicken was ice cold, the vegetables soggy, as if it had been deliberately left sitting out. Margaret looked appalled. "That's not acceptable," she whispered to Zara. "You should say something." Gathering her courage, Zara pressed the call button. When Trevor, the other flight attendant, responded, she politely explained the situation. "I'm sorry about that," he said, genuinely apologetic. "Let me get you a fresh meal." Vanessa intercepted him before he could reach the galley. Their hushed, but intense conversation was visible to the entire cabin, ending with Trevor reluctantly returning to Zara. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any more chicken meals available." Zara's stomach growled with hunger, but she maintained her composure. "That's all right. Could I have any meal that is available, please?" Trevor looked uncomfortable. "I'll see what I can do." Minutes later, he discreetly delivered a business-class meal to Zara, mouthing sorry as he did so. As Zara ate her lukewarm pasta, she decided to document what was happening. When Vanessa wasn't looking, she took out her phone and began recording a quiet video diary, speaking softly about the treatment she was experiencing. Margaret, seeing this, gave her an encouraging nod. Vanessa, returning to collect trays, spotted the phone in Zara's hand. "Phones need to be in airplane mode," she snapped, loudly enough to draw attention from nearby passengers. "I am in airplane mode," Zara replied calmly. "I'm just taking some video notes." Vanessa's face hardened. Recording on this aircraft is prohibited without authorization. This was a complete fabrication, as many passengers regularly took photos and videos during flights. "You need to delete that immediately." Zara stood her ground. "There's no such policy listed in the in-flight magazine or on the airline's website." Bradley Cooper interjected. "The flight attendant gave you an instruction. You're being disruptive and aggressive." His voice carried through the cabin, painting Zara as the problem. Marcus Johnson stood up. "Actually, sir, there is no prohibition against passengers recording their own experiences on commercial flights, provided they're not filming restricted areas like the cockpit." Vanessa's face flushed with anger. "If you continue to be disruptive," she hissed at Zara, "I'll have to report this to the captain." Zara felt her heart pounding, but remembered her mother's position. Surely, as the daughter of the CEO, she was safe from whatever threats this flight attendant made. What she didn't realize was that Vanessa's vendetta was just beginning, and that her connection to Jasmine Richardson would soon prove to be both her greatest vulnerability and her strongest weapon. The tension in first class had become palpable. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some pretending to be absorbed in movies while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. Zara placed her hat on her lap, still damp, but no longer dripping. After the meal service ended, she decided to wear it, partly to help it dry and partly as a small act of defiance against Vanessa's earlier accident. The designer hat sat elegantly on her head, its unique style framing her face beautifully despite the water damage. Vanessa, who had been whispering with Diana near the galley, immediately noticed. She marched over to Zara's seat, her heels clicking aggressively against the cabin floor. "Hats are not permitted to be worn in the premium cabin," she announced loudly, towering over Zara's seat. Zara looked around pointedly at two other first-class passengers, both white men in their 50s, who were wearing baseball caps without issue. "I don't see that rule being applied to everyone," she said quietly, maintaining her dignity despite her rising anxiety. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. "Those are different types of hats. Your urban accessory doesn't meet our dress code standards." The coded language was unmistakable. Margaret gasped audibly at the thinly veiled racism. "That's ridiculous," the elderly woman said. "I've flown first class on this airline for 20 years, and there has never been any restriction on headwear." Vanessa ignored her, focusing her icy stare on Zara. "Remove the hat immediately, or I'll be forced to take further action." Zara's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "This is a designer piece I received as a graduation gift. It's not disrupting anyone, and it doesn't violate any actual airline policy." Bradley Cooper huffed dramatically from across the aisle. "Some people just don't understand class and decorum," he said loudly to no one in particular. "This is why I usually fly private." His comment earned sympathetic nods from a few passengers and a conspiratorial smile from Vanessa. Zara pressed her call button, hoping for intervention from another crew member. Trevor appeared, looking wary. "Is there a problem?" he asked, glancing nervously between Zara and Vanessa. "This flight attendant is asking me to remove my hat, but other passengers are wearing hats without any issue," Zara explained. "I believe I'm being singled out." Trevor's discomfort was evident as he struggled with his conscience. "Vanessa is the lead flight attendant," he finally said, avoiding Zara's eyes. "She has discretion over cabin standards." His capitulation was a painful betrayal, especially since he, as a fellow black crew member, surely recognized the discrimination at play. Vanessa's triumph was immediate. "You heard him. Remove the hat now, or I'll have to report disruptive behavior to the captain." Bradley chose this moment to escalate further. "This is absolutely disrupting my business trip," he complained loudly. "I have a crucial meeting in New York, and this constant drama is preventing me from preparing properly." His performance was calculated to further isolate Zara. With shaking hands, Zara reached up to adjust her hat, not removing it, but repositioning it slightly, buying time as she considered her options. This simple gesture provoked Vanessa beyond all professional boundaries. "That's it," she snapped, reaching out suddenly and grabbing the hat from Zara's head. The motion was so unexpected and violent that Zara didn't have time to react. Vanessa pulled hard, but the hat's decorative pin caught in Zara's hair. Instead of letting go, Vanessa tugged harder. There was a sickening ripping sound as the delicate fabric tore. The ornamental pin broke free, its sharp edge slicing across Zara's fingers as she raised her hands protectively. Blood welled from the cut, dripping onto the torn remains of her precious gift. The cabin fell silent in shock. Even Bradley seemed stunned by the physical escalation. Zara stared at her bleeding hand and the destroyed hat, tears welling in her eyes despite her determination not to cry in front of these people. Vanessa took a step back, momentarily frozen as she realized she had crossed a line from discrimination into physical assault. Marcus Johnson was on his feet immediately. "That's assault," he stated clearly, his air marshal authority evident in his tone. "I need you to step back from this passenger right now." Margaret had her phone out, having recorded the entire incident. "I have it all on video," she declared, her previous grandmotherly gentleness replaced by righteous anger. "Every second of it." Zara finally looked up from her bleeding hand, her voice barely audible through her contained tears. "My mother gave me this hat. It was one of a kind." The personal devastation in those simple words cut through the tension in the cabin, making several passengers shift uncomfortably as they recognized the cruelty they had just witnessed. Vanessa, realizing the seriousness of her actions, quickly shifted to defense. "She tried to hit me," she claimed desperately. "I was protecting myself." This obvious lie hung in the air, contradicted by Margaret's video evidence and the witness of every passenger in the surrounding rows. Blood continued to drip from Zara's fingers onto the torn designer hat, a physical manifestation of the violence that had just been inflicted not just on an object, but on a young black woman's dignity and sense of safety. Time seemed to stand still in the cabin as everyone processed what had just happened. Blood dripped from Zara's finger onto her lap, staining her navy dress with small crimson spots. The torn designer hat lay in pieces, its beautiful craftsmanship reduced to tattered fragments. Trevor rushed forward with a first aid kit, his previous reluctance now overcome by the undeniable violence he had witnessed. "Let me help," he said, gently taking Zara's hand and cleaning the cut. Marcus Johnson, the air marshal, stepped between Zara and Vanessa, his posture protective. "I need your full name and employee number," he said to Vanessa, his voice level, but authoritative. "This incident will be reported to airline security and possibly local authorities." Vanessa's composure cracked visibly, her face alternating between fear and defiance. "You don't understand," she hissed, lowering her voice. "She's been aggressive and disruptive since boarding. I was defending myself." Margaret, the elderly passenger, stood up shakily but determinedly. "That's absolutely false," she declared, holding up her phone. "I have the entire incident recorded. This young lady has been nothing but polite despite your consistent harassment." Several other passengers nodded in agreement, the clear injustice of the situation finally breaking through their previous reluctance to get involved. Bradley Cooper, sensing the shift in cabin sentiment, changed tactics. "This is completely unacceptable," he said loudly, though it was unclear which part he found unacceptable, the assault or being caught witnessing it. Zara, fighting back tears, reached for her own phone. "I need to call my mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. As Trevor bandaged her cut finger, she dialed Jasmine's number with her free hand. The call went straight to voicemail. "Mom, something happened on the flight. Please call me back as soon as you can." Her voice sounded small and young, betraying how shaken she truly was despite her outward composure. Suddenly, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a passenger disturbance, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Charlotte. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Zara looked up in alarm. "Passenger disturbance? But I didn't do anything wrong." Marcus frowned deeply. "This isn't right. Someone's given the captain incorrect information." He moved toward the cockpit to speak with the flight crew, but Vanessa stepped in his path. "I've already briefed the captain on the situation," she said smugly. "As lead flight attendant, my assessment of cabin safety takes priority." Marcus's professional demeanor didn't crack, but his eyes hardened. "We'll see about that." As the plane began its descent, Zara tried her mother's number again, growing increasingly desperate. Jasmine was still unreachable, likely in her emergency board meeting where phones would be silenced. With trembling hands, Zara composed a text message instead. "Mom, emergency. Flight attendant assaulted me, tore your gift. I'm bleeding. They're making emergency landing. Please help." She attached a photo of her bandaged hand holding the torn hat fragments and hit send, praying that her mother would see it soon. The plane landed roughly in Charlotte, taxiing to a remote part of the airport, where several security vehicles were already waiting. Zara's heart pounded painfully in her chest. What was happening? How had a simple flight turned into this nightmare? Would you have stayed calm if someone physically assaulted you and then blamed you for it? Comment number 1 if you think Zara handled this situation with remarkable composure. Or number 2, if you believe she should have been more forceful in defending herself. And if you're as outraged by this blatant racial profiling as we are, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that expose injustice. As airport security personnel boarded the plane, could Zara have imagined that this was all part of a calculated plan, rather than just an isolated incident of racism? And where was Jasmine Richardson when her daughter needed her most? The Charlotte Douglas International Airport ground crew secured the aircraft as local airport security boarded through the front cabin door. 2 stern-looking officers in blue uniforms stepped inside, scanning the first-class cabin with practiced authority. Vanessa rushed forward to meet them, her entire demeanor transformed into one of victimhood and fear. "That's her," she said, pointing directly at Zara. "She became violent when I enforced our cabin policies. She attempted to strike me and has been creating a disturbance throughout the flight." The security officers approached Zara's seat, their hands resting near their tasers in a subtle but clear display of force. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us," the taller officer stated flatly. Zara looked between them in disbelief, her bandaged fingers still throbbing. "What? I didn't do anything wrong. She assaulted me, not the other way around." Marcus Johnson stood up, displaying his air marshal credentials. "Officers, I witnessed the entire incident. This passenger is the victim, not the aggressor. The flight attendant physically assaulted her and damaged her property." The security officers hesitated momentarily, but Vanessa jumped in. "He's not an active marshal on this flight. He's traveling as a regular passenger and has been interfering with crew member duties." This was a blatant lie, but it created just enough doubt to give the officers pause. Margaret tried to intervene, holding up her phone. "I have video evidence of what really happened," she insisted. "This young lady did nothing wrong." The second officer, whose name badge read Jackson, barely glanced at the phone. "Ma'am, we'll review all evidence at the security office. Now we need to remove the passenger identified by the crew." The dismissal was automatic, as if Margaret's testimony and evidence were irrelevant compared to the flight attendant's claims. Zara, realizing that arguing would only make the situation Worse, slowly gathered her torn hat and belongings. "Can I at least make a phone call?" she asked, thinking of her mother. Officer Jackson shook his head. "You can make calls after processing." As Zara stood to leave, several passengers watched in uncomfortable silence, the injustice playing out, before them too intimidating to challenge. Only Margaret and Marcus continued to protest. "This is wrong," Marcus stated firmly. "I'm coming with you to provide my statement." Officer Jackson blocked his path. "Sir, remain in your seat or you'll be detained as well." The threat was effective, forcing Marcus to watch helplessly as Zara was escorted off the plane. The young woman walked with as much dignity as she could muster, her chin held high, despite the tears threatening to spill. As she passed Bradley, Cooper's seat, he pretended to be engrossed in his phone, avoiding eye contact entirely. Led through the jetway and into the sterile corridors of the airport, Zara felt a rising sense of panic. No one knew where she was. Her mother couldn't reach her. She was being treated like a criminal for the crime of existing while black in first class. The officers brought her to a small, windowless room in the airport security area, where she was instructed to sit in a metal chair bolted to the floor. "Your phone and belongings," Officer Jackson demanded, holding out a plastic bin. Zara hesitated, clutching her phone, her only lifeline to her mother. "I need to contact my family," she pleaded. "They won't know where I am." The officer's expression remained impassive. After processing, reluctantly, Zara surrendered her phone, watching as it was placed in a sealed evidence bag along with her torn hat and other personal items. A female officer arrived to conduct a pat-down search, a humiliating experience that left Zara feeling violated and powerless. Left alone in the room for what felt like hours but was closer to 45 minutes, Zara tried to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around her. The door finally opened, and Officer Jackson returned with a clipboard. "Zara Williams, you've been reported for interfering with flight crew members and assaulting airline personnel, both federal offenses." His tone suggested her guilt was already determined. "That's not true," Zara protested, her voice rising with desperation. "The flight attendant assaulted me. There are witnesses, video evidence." Jackson continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Due to the serious nature of these allegations, we're required to complete a full incident report before determining next steps." He set a form in front of her. "I need your complete personal information and a statement regarding the incident." Zara stared at the form, her mind racing. Should she cooperate? Demand a lawyer? What would her mother advise in this situation? Taking a deep breath, Zara decided to provide her basic information, but wrote in the statement section, "I request to speak with my mother, Jasmine Richardson, before providing any statement. I also request to view the video evidence taken by another passenger." She slid the form back to Officer Jackson, who glanced at it and frowned. "Richardson, as in the airline CEO?" Zara nodded, hoping that mentioning her mother's position might change the power dynamics. Instead, Jackson's expression hardened further. "Claiming family connections to intimidate security personnel can be added to your charges," he warned, clearly not believing her. "Wait here." He left with the form, locking the door behind him. Zara sat in the cold metal chair, alone and increasingly frightened. Outside this room, the flight would soon depart again for New York, taking with it the only witnesses who could corroborate her story. Meanwhile, Jasmine Richardson remained in her board meeting, still unaware that her daughter was being detained and accused of crimes she didn't commit. Jasmine Richardson sat at the head of the conference table in Transglobal Airlines Manhattan headquarters, surrounded by board members and executives debating the Asian Routes merger. Her attention drifted momentarily to her silenced phone, thinking of Zara's graduation day that she had missed. The meeting had been called with such urgency that she hadn't questioned it, assuming the merger truly was in jeopardy. Now, hours into discussions that seemed to circle without resolution, she found herself wondering why this couldn't have waited one more day. As Richard Montgomery droned on about regulatory concerns, Jasmine discreetly checked her phone under the table. Her heart stopped. 27 missed calls from unknown numbers. A text from Zara with a photo that made her blood run cold. Her daughter's hand bleeding, holding the torn remnants of the hat she had given her just hours earlier. "Emergency," the text read. "Flight attendant assaulted me, tore your gift. I'm bleeding. They're making emergency landing. Please help." Jasmine stood up so abruptly that her chair crashed to the floor behind her. "Meeting adjourned," she announced, her voice cutting through the room like steel. Richard Montgomery blinked in confusion. "Jasmine, we haven't resolved the visa requirements for the Shanghai staff yet." She fixed him with a glare that made him physically recoil. "My daughter has been assaulted on one of our planes. Nothing else matters right now." She stormed out, already dialing the airline's operations center. "This is CEO Richardson. I need information on Flight 1237 immediately." The operations manager stumbled through his response, clearly surprised by the direct call from the chief executive. "Ma'am, that flight was diverted to Charlotte approximately 30 minutes ago due to a passenger disturbance. It's scheduled to continue to New York within the hour." Jasmine's grip on her phone tightened. "What passenger disturbance?" "Specifically." There was a pause, keyboard clicks audible in the background. "The report indicates a female passenger became aggressive with a crew member. Security removed her in Charlotte." Jasmine closed her eyes briefly, containing her rage with tremendous effort. "That female passenger is my daughter, and according to her, she was assaulted by our crew member, not the other way around. I want that plane held at the gate. No one leaves until I get there." The operations manager's voice became hesitant. "Ma'am, I don't have the authority to delay a flight without an operational reason." Jasmine cut him off. "Consider this an operational reason. If that plane takes off before I reach Charlotte, you and everyone involved in that decision will be looking for new jobs tomorrow. Is that clear enough?" She ended the call and immediately contacted her executive assistant. "Judith, I need the company jet ready in 20 minutes. Flight plan to Charlotte, and get me Richard on the phone now." Minutes later, as she raced toward the company helicopter that would take her to the private airfield, Richard Montgomery called. "Jasmine, what's going on? We have critical decisions that need to be made today." Something in his tone added to Jasmine's suspicion. This emergency meeting had pulled her away from her daughter's graduation, and now Zara was in trouble. "Richard, my daughter has been assaulted on one of our planes and is being detained in Charlotte. I'm heading there now in the company jet." There was a pause on the line. "That's unfortunate timing," Richard said carefully. "But surely local management can handle this situation while we complete our meeting. The Shanghai representatives are expecting decisions today." Jasmine stepped into the waiting helicopter, her anger building. "My daughter comes first, always. Handle it without me or postpone." She ended the call, a nagging suspicion forming in her mind. During the flight to Charlotte, Jasmine tried repeatedly to reach Zara, each call going straight to voicemail. She contacted Charlotte Airport Security, identifying herself as the CEO of Transglobal Airlines, demanding information about her daughter. "We have no record of a Zara Williams in our custody," the supervisor claimed, after keeping her on hold for precious minutes. "Are you certain she was detained here?" Jasmine's patience evaporated. "Track her by the flight. Transglobal 1237. A passenger was removed by airport security. That passenger is my 16-year-old daughter." More minutes wasted on hold. "Ma'am, I'm not showing any juvenile detainees from that flight. The passenger removed was an adult female, approximately 25 years old, charged with assaulting a crew member." The deliberate misidentification of Zara sent chills down Jasmine's spine. Something was very wrong. While still in the air, Jasmine opened her laptop, using her executive access to the airline systems. She tracked Flight 1237, confirming it was indeed still on the ground in Charlotte, though showing preparations for departure. She then accessed the passenger manifest, finding Zara's name and reservation. The flight attendant duty roster showed. The crew included Vanessa Morris as lead flight attendant, Trevor Washington, and Diana Patel. A quick search of employee records revealed that Vanessa had been with the airline for 15 years, with several customer complaints in her file that had somehow never resulted in disciplinary action. As Jasmine dug deeper, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Her blood ran cold as she saw the headline. Disturbance on transglobal flight, CEO's daughter involved? Somehow the story was already leaking to the media. Scrolling through social media, Jasmine found shaky video clips from inside the plane, showing parts of the confrontation between Zara and Vanessa. One clip clearly showed Vanessa grabbing and tearing the hat, Zara's hand coming away bloody. The comments were a battlefield of racism and support, with some defending Zara, while others claimed she must have provoked the flight attendant. Jasmine immediately called the airline's legal team. "I need a team in Charlotte immediately. My daughter is being detained under false pretenses after being assaulted by one of our employees, and I need our PR department to prepare a statement. This is about to explode." She forwarded the social media links to both teams, ensuring they understood the gravity of the situation. As the company jet began its descent into Charlotte, Jasmine steeled herself for battle. Someone had orchestrated this attack on her daughter, and they had chosen the wrong mother to mess with. In a private corner of the Charlotte Airport food court, Vanessa Morris huddled over her phone, speaking urgently in hushed tones. The flight to New York had been mysteriously delayed, and rumors were spreading through the crew that CEO Richardson herself had ordered the hold. "It's falling apart, Bradley," she hissed into the phone, her fingers nervously shredding a paper napkin. "They're holding the flight and security is being weird about the girl." On the other end of the line, Bradley Cooper's voice remained calm, calculated. "Stick to the plan, Vanessa. We've already laid the groundwork. The security report shows her as aggressive, correct?" Vanessa glanced over her shoulder, making sure no one was within earshot. "Yes, Jackson filed it exactly as we discussed, but there's a complication. She's claiming to be Jasmine Richardson's daughter." Bradley's laugh was cold. "That's easy to discredit. Anyone can claim family connections when they're in trouble. Security deals with that all the time." Vanessa wasn't convinced. "But what if she is? What if Richardson finds out what we did to her daughter?" There was a pause on the line. "Then our plan works even better than expected," Bradley finally responded. "The entire point was to create a scandal involving Richardson's leadership. If her own daughter allegedly assaulted our staff and she intervenes improperly, the board has grounds to remove her." The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Vanessa. This had never been just about humiliating a black teenager in first class. It was about creating a scandal that would force Jasmine Richardson out as CEO. "So that's why you promised me the chief purser position if this worked," she whispered, the full scope of the conspiracy dawning on her. "You're working with someone on the board to oust Richardson." Bradley's voice hardened. "Focus on your part, Vanessa. Keep the story straight. The girl was aggressive, threatened you, and attempted to strike you. You defended yourself. Simple." Meanwhile, in a small office adjacent to the security holding rooms, Officer Jackson was placing a call of his own. "Sir, we may have a situation. The girl is claiming to be the CEO's daughter." The voice on the other end belonged to Charles Whitmore, Transglobal's vice president of operations, and a board member who had long resented serving under Jasmine Richardson. "That's impossible," Charles replied dismissively. "Richardson doesn't have a daughter. She's trying to manipulate you." Jackson frowned at the paperwork in front of him. She wrote down Richardson's name as her mother. What if she's telling the truth? Charles's response was immediate and cold. Process her as an adult. Charge her with assault on a flight crew member and interfering with flight operations. That's a federal offense. By the time anyone sorts it out, the damage will be done. Jackson hesitated, suddenly uncertain about his role in what was beginning to feel like a conspiracy rather than routine security work. The marshal on board is making noise, says the girl was the victim, and an older passenger has video. Charles Whitmore's voice turned threatening. Remember our arrangement, Jackson. Your brother's job at corporate security depends on your cooperation today. Process her as an adult, confiscate all evidence, and make sure she doesn't contact anyone until we've controlled the narrative. Jackson looked through the one-way glass at Zara, sitting alone in the interrogation room, her posture straight despite her obvious distress. For a moment, his conscience battled with self-interest. Then he made his decision. "I'll take care of it," he replied, ending the call. He entered the holding room with a stack of forms. Ms. Williams, you're being processed for assault on aircraft crew, a federal offense under 49 U.S. Code paragraph 46504. As you're 16, you would normally be processed as a juvenile, but given the severity of the charges and your physical maturity, we're processing you as an adult. Zara's eyes widened in shock and fear. You can't do that. I'm a minor. I have rights. I need to speak to my mother. Jackson ignored her protests, methodically, taking her fingerprints and mugshot photos. These charges carry penalties of up to 20 years in federal prison, he informed her mechanically, watching her face pale with each word. Given your lack of prior record, a plea deal might reduce that significantly. Zara fought back tears, refusing to let this man see her break. I didn't assault anyone. The flight attendant assaulted me. There are witnesses. There's video evidence. Why won't you look at it? Outside in the terminal, Margaret was frantically trying to advocate for Zara. Despite her age and obvious physical discomfort from standing for extended periods, she had refused to reboard the flight to New York. That young lady was assaulted by your employee, she insisted to the Transglobal customer service representative. I have video proof right here on my phone. The representative, clearly uncomfortable, kept repeating the same response. Ma'am, this is a security matter now. We can't interfere with an ongoing investigation. Marcus Johnson was having no better luck with airport security. I am a federal air marshal, he repeated for the third time, his credentials in hand. I witnessed the entire incident. The flight attendant was the aggressor, not the passenger. The security supervisor maintained his practiced neutrality. Your statement will be included in the report, Agent Johnson. In the meantime, the passenger will be processed according to protocol. The dismissive treatment of clear evidence and credible witnesses was not accidental bureaucratic incompetence. It was a coordinated effort to isolate Zara and control the narrative. As Jackson completed the processing paperwork, a text message arrived from Charles Whitmore. Keep Richardson's daughter isolated until the flight departs. We need those witnesses gone. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their authority like this? Comment number 1 if you believe there should be harsher penalties for those who use their positions to discriminate. Or number 2, if you think current systems are adequate to prevent such abuses. And if seeing this level of coordinated injustice makes your blood boil. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community fighting for accountability. As Zara was officially booked on federal charges, handcuffed like a dangerous criminal rather than a terrified teenager, would anyone be able to break through this wall of corruption before it was too late? And when Jasmine Richardson finally arrived, would she find herself walking into a carefully laid trap designed to destroy not just her daughter, but her entire career? The company jet touched down at Charlotte Douglas International Airport with a squeal of tires, taxiing rapidly to the private aviation terminal. Jasmine Richardson was first down the stairs, not waiting for the usual courtesies extended to a CEO. Her face was a mask of controlled fury as she strode across the tarmac, the airport operations director hurrying to keep pace with her. Ms. Richardson, I wasn't informed you'd be arriving personally, he stammered, intimidated by her presence and the 3-person legal team following in her wake. Where is my daughter? Jasmine demanded, not breaking stride. Security claims they have no record of detaining a 16-year-old girl from Flight 1237, yet I have confirmation she was removed from the aircraft. The director made several calls as they moved through the terminal, doors magically opening before the imposing CEO. Ma'am, according to my security chief, they're processing a passenger from that flight, but she's listed as an adult female, age 25, charged with assault on a crew member. Jasmine stopped abruptly, turning to fix the director with a glare that could have melted steel. My daughter is 16 years old. She was flying on my employee benefits using her legal ID. If someone has deliberately misclassified her to prevent me from finding her, I will personally ensure they never work in aviation again. The threat wasn't hollow, and the director knew it. He made another call, this one more urgent and direct. Within minutes, they had confirmation a young woman from Flight 1237 was being held in the security processing center, though details were mysteriously sparse. Jasmine and her legal team were directed to a nondescript door marked Airport Security Administrative Center, near the international arrivals area. Inside, they encountered a reception desk manned by a nervous-looking security officer. "I'm Jasmine Richardson, CEO of Transglobal Airlines," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of her authority. "My daughter, Zara Williams, was illegally removed from my company's aircraft and is being detained here. I demand to see her immediately." The security officer blanched, clearly unprepared for a direct confrontation with an airline CEO. "Ma'am, I'll need to get my supervisor. Our procedures require proper identification and verification for all visitor requests." One of Jasmine's attorneys stepped forward, placing his business card on the counter. "I'm Martin Reynolds, Chief Counsel for Transglobal Airlines. Be advised that every minute this minor child is detained, without proper notification of her parent, constitutes a separate violation of federal law. The clock is ticking." The combination of legal threat and executive authority finally broke through the wall of obstruction. The supervisor emerged, his professional demeanor barely concealing his discomfort. "Ms. Richardson, there appears to have been some confusion regarding the passenger's identity. If you'll follow me, we can sort this out." Jasmine wasn't interested in excuses. "Where is my daughter?" The supervisor led them down a sterile hallway to an observation room with a one-way mirror. Through the glass, Jasmine saw Zara sitting at a metal table, handcuffed, her face tear-streaked but her posture stubbornly erect. The bandaged cut on her hand was clearly visible, as was a developing bruise on her wrist from the handcuffs. Maternal rage surged through Jasmine's body. "Unlock that door. Now." Her voice was deadly quiet. When the supervisor hesitated, Martin Reynolds stepped closer. "That is a minor child being held without parental notification or consent. The legal ramifications are already catastrophic. Don't make them worse." The supervisor finally relented, unlocking the door. Jasmine rushed to her daughter, enveloping her in a fierce embrace. "Mom!" Zara's composure finally broke, tears streaming down her face. "They wouldn't let me call you. They said I assaulted the flight attendant, but she attacked me. She ripped your gift, and when I tried to protect it, she claimed I hit her. They're charging me as an adult, saying I could go to prison for 20 years. Jasmine turned to the security personnel who had followed them into the room, her expression murderous. "Remove these handcuffs from my daughter immediately." Officer Jackson, suddenly faced with the actual CEO rather than a teenager he could intimidate, fumbled with the keys. "Ma'am, there are procedures that need to be followed. She's been charged with a federal offense." Martin Reynolds intervened smoothly. "Under whose authority was this minor processed as an adult? Where is the documentation authorizing that decision? Who made the determination that parental notification wasn't required?" The barrage of legal questions highlighted the procedural violations that had occurred. As the handcuffs came off, Jasmine examined the bruising on Zara's wrists and the bandaged cut on her hand. Each injury fueled her determination to uncover who was behind this. "We're leaving now," she stated, her tone brooking no argument. "All charges against my daughter are to be dropped immediately." Jackson stood his ground with the last remnants of his courage. "Ma'am, even as CEO, you don't have the authority to override federal charges." Jasmine smiled coldly. "You're right. But as a mother, I have every right to remove my underage daughter from illegal detention. And as CEO, I have the resources to make everyone involved in this travesty wish they'd never heard my name." As they prepared to leave, a young Transglobal employee rushed into the room out of breath from running. "Ms. Richardson," he panted, "I had to find you. I'm Dylan from customer service. I overheard something you need to know." The young man looked nervously at the security officers. "In private, please." Jasmine nodded, guiding him outside the room along with Zara and her legal team. In the hallway, Dylan lowered his voice. "I was in the break room when Ms. Morris, the lead flight attendant from 1237, was on the phone with someone named Bradley. She was talking about how this was all part of a plan to embarrass you, something about forcing your resignation. She mentioned someone named Charles was involved too." Jasmine's mind raced, connecting the dots. Bradley Cooper, the businessman on the flight. Charles Whitmore, the board member who had pushed hardest for this emergency meeting that pulled her away from Zara's graduation. The elaborate setup began to make sense, a coordinated effort to create a scandal involving her daughter that would force her out as CEO. Instead of immediately removing Zara from the airport as she had initially planned, Jasmine made a split-second decision. Martin, I need you to stay with Zara and ensure all charges are formally withdrawn. Dylan, thank you for your integrity. I'll make sure it's remembered. She turned to her daughter, her expression softening momentarily. Sweetheart, I need to finish something. Are you okay waiting with Martin for a little while longer? Zara, seeing the determined glint in her mother's eye, nodded bravely. What are you going to do? Jasmine straightened her jacket, her CEO persona fully engaged. I'm going to board that plane. Flight 1237 sat at the gate in Charlotte, passengers growing increasingly restless. The brief delay announced by the captain had stretched to nearly 2 hours, with no further explanation provided. In first class, Bradley Cooper was making a show of his impatience, ostentatiously checking his watch and sighing loudly enough for everyone to hear. Vanessa Morris hovered nearby, her earlier confidence replaced by visible anxiety. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice came over the intercom. We apologize for the continued delay. We've been informed that a company executive is coming aboard to address a situation that occurred during our flight. We appreciate your patience and understanding. Bradley's head snapped up at the announcement, his face draining of color. He leaned toward Vanessa, who was restocking the galley. What company executive? He demanded in a harsh whisper. Vanessa shook her head, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged napkins. I don't know. Maybe a regional director? They wouldn't send Richardson herself. The words had barely left her mouth when the cabin door opened. Jasmine Richardson stepped into the aircraft, her presence immediately commanding attention. Behind her was Zara, chin held high despite her reddened eyes and bandaged hand. A collective gasp rippled through the first-class cabin. Vanessa froze, a stack of napkins slipping from her hands and scattering across the galley floor. Bradley Cooper quickly averted his gaze, suddenly fascinated by the safety card in his seat-back pocket. Captain, Jasmine addressed the flight deck through the open cockpit door. I need 10 minutes of your time before departure. The captain, recognizing the CEO instantly, nodded his agreement. Of course, Ms. Richardson. Jasmine turned to face the passengers, her professional demeanor perfectly maintained despite the storm of emotions beneath the surface. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay to your journey. I'm Jasmine Richardson, CEO of Transglobal Airlines. A serious incident occurred on this flight that required my personal attention. Vanessa attempted to slip past toward the rear of the aircraft, but the captain, emerging from the cockpit, blocked her path. Ms. Morris, please remain in the forward cabin. Jasmine continued addressing the passengers. Earlier today, a young passenger was physically assaulted by a member of our crew, then falsely accused of being the aggressor, removed from the aircraft, and detained by airport security. She gestured to Zara, standing tall beside her mother despite her obvious exhaustion. This young woman is my daughter, who was flying to join me in New York after her high school graduation. A murmur ran through the cabin as passengers processed this revelation. Margaret, who had refused to reboard until she knew Zara was safe, called out from her seat. I have the whole thing on video. That flight attendant, she pointed to Vanessa, deliberately damaged her hat, then physically attacked her when she tried to protect it. Bradley Cooper stood suddenly. This is inappropriate. We're all going to miss our connections because of a teenage tantrum. I demand that we depart immediately. Jasmine fixed him with an icy stare. Mr. Cooper, I believe you and Ms. Morris are acquainted beyond this flight. Would you care to explain the nature of your relationship to your fellow passengers? Bradley's face flushed. I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never met this woman before today. At that moment, Marcus Johnson stood from his seat. That's false. I observed you and the flight attendant having several private exchanges that appeared coordinated. As an air marshal, I'm trained to notice unusual patterns of behavior among passengers and crew. Jasmine nodded her thanks to Marcus before addressing the cabin again. We have reason to believe that what happened today was not a random incident, but a coordinated attempt to create a scandal involving my daughter. Vanessa, seeing her carefully constructed scheme collapsing around her, broke down. "It wasn't my fault," she blurted out, drawing all eyes to her trembling form. "Bradley promised me the chief purser position if I helped create a situation with her. He said management wanted to test how she would handle confrontation, not that she was your daughter." The desperate lie fell flat as Bradley Cooper's face contorted with fury. "Shut up, you idiot," he hissed, forgetting himself entirely. The outburst confirmed their conspiracy more effectively than any confession could have. Jasmine maintained her composure, though her eyes blazed with controlled anger. "Ms. Morris, you are terminated from Transglobal Airlines, effective immediately. Please surrender your company ID and exit the aircraft." Vanessa's face crumpled as the reality of her situation hit her. "You can't do this. I have 15 years with this company." Jasmine's expression remained implacable. "You physically assaulted a 16-year-old passenger and conspired to file false charges against her. Consider yourself fortunate that termination is all you're facing at the moment." As airport security arrived to escort Vanessa from the plane, Jasmine turned her attention to Bradley Cooper. "Mr. Cooper, I believe your travel plans have changed as well. Security will assist you with deplaning." Bradley stood, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperate calculation. "You're making a serious mistake, Richardson. Charles won't let this stand." The slip confirmed Jasmine's suspicions about board involvement. "Thank you for that confirmation, Mr. Cooper. I'm sure the board will be very interested to hear about Charles Whitmore's extracurricular activities." Security officers appeared at Bradley's row. "Sir, please gather your belongings and come with us." As the co-conspirators were removed from the aircraft, Jasmine addressed the remaining passengers once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, fresh crew members are boarding now to complete your journey to New York. Each of you will receive full refunds for today's flight and vouchers for future travel as an apology for the delay. I assure you that what you witnessed today does not reflect the values or standard practices of Transglobal Airlines." As passengers applauded, many approaching to express their support and outrage at what had happened, Jasmine pulled Zara into a protective embrace. "Let's go home, baby girl. We have a graduation to celebrate." They exited the aircraft together, heads held high as a new crew boarded to complete the flight to New York. In the terminal, Jasmine's phone rang. It was Richard Montgomery, the board chairman. "Jasmine, what the hell is going on? Charles is saying you're creating a scene in Charlotte, abusing your authority." Jasmine laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Richard, I suggest you call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. The real emergency, not the fake one that pulled me away from my daughter's graduation. We need to discuss Charles Whitmore's attempt to orchestrate my removal as CEO by orchestrating an assault on my child." The stunned silence on the other end of the line was all the confirmation she needed that Richard hadn't been part of the conspiracy. "We'll continue this conversation tomorrow," she concluded. "Right now, I'm taking my daughter home." The following morning, Jasmine and Zara returned to New York on the company jet. Zara had finally gotten some rest, though the emotional and physical trauma of the previous day had left visible marks. The cut on her hand was properly bandaged now, and the torn remains of her special hat had been carefully preserved as evidence. As they approached the Transglobal headquarters building, Jasmine received a text from her executive assistant. "Emergency board meeting confirmed for 9 a.m. All members present, including Charles Whitmore." Jasmine squeezed her daughter's hand. "Are you sure you want to come to this? You could rest at the hotel." Zara shook her head firmly. "I need to see this through, Mom. I need to look them in the eye." Proud of her daughter's courage, Jasmine nodded. "All right, but you let me handle the talking." They entered the building through the executive entrance, bypassing the usual security protocols. Word of yesterday's events had clearly spread, as employees stopped to stare or whisper as they passed. The boardroom fell silent as Jasmine entered with Zara at her side. Around the massive mahogany table sat the 12 members of Transglobal's board of directors, their expressions ranging from concern to poorly concealed hostility. Richard Montgomery, the chairman, stood to greet them. "Jasmine, while we understand yesterday was difficult, Bringing a minor to a board meeting is highly irregular. Jasmine's smile was razor-sharp. Given that yesterday's emergency meeting was a deliberate ploy to separate me from my daughter so she could be targeted, I thought her presence today was entirely appropriate. She guided Zara to a seat beside her at the head of the table. Besides, the board should see firsthand the results of the conspiracy hatched by one of its members. All eyes turned to Charles Whitmore, who sat stiffly in his chair, his face an expressionless mask. Tall and imposing with salt and pepper hair, Whitmore had been with the company for 25 years and had been passed over for the CEO position when the board selected Jasmine instead. "These accusations are completely unfounded," Charles stated flatly. "I had nothing to do with whatever unfortunate incident occurred on that flight." Jasmine tapped her tablet, and the boardroom's large display screen came to life, showing a series of text messages between Charles Whitmore and Bradley Cooper. "Interesting that you would say that, Charles, when we have your communications with Bradley Cooper discussing the need to create a Richardson scandal to force a leadership change." The color drained from Charles's face as his own words appeared. On the screen, flight attendant confirmed, "Will create situation with girl. Security contact ready at CLT. Board already in emergency session without CEO. Perfect timing." Richard Montgomery's expression hardened as he read the messages. "Charles, is this authentic?" Whitmore's composure cracked slightly. "This is a violation of privacy. Those communications were obtained illegally." Jasmine remained calm, moving to the next piece of evidence. "Then perhaps you'd prefer the recorded phone call between you and Officer Jackson at Charlotte Airport Security, where you instructed him to process my 16-year-old daughter as an adult and file federal charges against her?" She played the audio, Charles's voice filling the boardroom. "Process her as an adult. Charge her with assault on a flight crew member and interfering with flight operations. That's a federal offense. By the time anyone sorts it out, the damage will be done." The recording continued, revealing Charles's threat regarding Jackson's brother's job in corporate security. When it ended, the room was deadly silent. Several board members looked physically ill at what they had heard. Richard Montgomery broke the silence. "Jasmine, do the authorities have this evidence?" She nodded. "The FBI received everything this morning. This wasn't just corporate politics, Richard. This was conspiracy, assault on a minor, filing false charges, and attempted kidnapping by fraudulent imprisonment." Charles Whitmore stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. "This is absurd. Even if these recordings are authentic, which I don't concede, the girl was never in any real danger. This was business standard corporate maneuvering to address concerns about your leadership." Zara, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice steady despite her youth. "You had me fingerprinted and photographed like a criminal. Your security officer told me I was facing 20 years in federal prison. I was handcuffed until my mother found me." Her direct testimony had a powerful effect on the board members, making the human impact of the conspiracy impossible to ignore. Charles attempted to regain control of the narrative. "I'm sorry if things went further than intended, but let's be honest, the real issue here is Jasmine Richardson's inability to separate her personal and professional responsibilities. The Asian Roots merger is now in jeopardy because she abandoned a critical meeting for a family matter." Jasmine laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "The Asian Roots merger was never in jeopardy, Charles. That was the lie you used to ensure. I would miss my daughter's graduation and be unavailable when your co-conspirators targeted her." She displayed another document on the screen, a confirmation from the Shanghai Transportation Authority that all permissions had been secured 3 days earlier. "You created a fake emergency to isolate me from my daughter, then orchestrated her assault and detention to create a scandal that would force my resignation." Richard Montgomery had heard enough. "Charles, I think you should leave this meeting while the board discusses next steps." Whitmore's face flushed with anger. "If I go down for this, I won't go alone. There are others in this room who supported the need for leadership change." His threat hung in the air as security personnel appeared at the boardroom door, summoned discreetly by Richard's assistant. As Charles was escorted out, he made one final desperate attempt. I have evidence of my own Zara Williams attacking our flight attendant. The security footage tells a very different story. Jasmine remained unruffled. You mean the edited video that Officer Jackson created after confiscating Margaret Wilson's phone? Unfortunately for you, Ms. Wilson had already uploaded the original to her cloud storage before boarding. We have the unedited footage, the edited version, and metadata proving when the alterations were made. Defeated, Charles Whitmore was led away, his 25-year career at Transglobal Airlines ending in disgrace. When the door closed behind him, Richard turned to Jasmine. I had no idea he would go to these lengths. The concerns about your leadership style were raised in normal board discussions, but this... He gestured helplessly. Jasmine's expression remained stern. The concerns about my leadership have always been about one thing, Richard, that I don't look or act like the CEOs who came before me. But after today, I think we all understand the real problem wasn't my leadership style. It was the lengths some would go to undermine the first black woman to lead this company. 6 months later, Zara Williams stood in front of her dormitory at Columbia University, watching as fellow freshmen and their parents navigated the controlled chaos of move-in day. The late summer sun glinted off her new designer hat, specially commissioned to replace the one destroyed during the flight incident. Though outwardly composed, Zara still carried the emotional scars of that day. Nightmares occasionally disrupted her sleep, and crowded spaces sometimes triggered anxiety that she worked hard to manage. The criminal charges had been dropped within days of the incident, but the trauma lingered in ways both visible and hidden. As she scanned the busy street, she spotted her mother's car approaching. Jasmine Richardson, still CEO of Transglobal Airlines but with a noticeably different approach to her role, emerged from the vehicle with a warm smile. "Ready for this new chapter, baby girl?" she asked, embracing her daughter tightly. The months following the incident had brought significant changes to both their lives. Charles Whitmore, Bradley Cooper, Vanessa Morris, and Officer Jackson all faced criminal charges ranging from assault to conspiracy and false imprisonment. The scandal had made national headlines, becoming a lightning rod in ongoing conversations about racial discrimination in corporate America. For Transglobal Airlines, it had been both a crisis and an opportunity for transformation. Under Jasmine's leadership, the company had implemented comprehensive anti-racism training for all employees, established clear protocols for handling passenger complaints, and created an independent oversight committee to ensure equitable treatment of all customers. Jasmine had also become more open about sharing her experiences as a black woman in corporate leadership, speaking candidly in interviews about the challenges she faced. The most important lesson, she told one interviewer, was recognizing that I couldn't shield my daughter from racism by succeeding myself. The system needs to change, not just individual outcomes. Zara had changed too. The pre-law courses she had registered for reflected her shifting priorities and awakened passion for justice. I thought I wanted to follow you into business, she had explained to her mother. But after what happened, I realized I want to fight systemic racism through the law. Jasmine had supported this decision wholeheartedly, proud of how her daughter had transformed trauma into purpose. Margaret Wilson, the elderly passenger who had stood by Zara during the flight, had become an unexpected ally and friend. Now serving as the head of a newly formed Airline Passengers' Rights Association, Margaret channeled her outrage into advocacy, with Zara occasionally joining her at speaking engagements during school breaks. Trevor Washington, the flight attendant who had remained silent during Vanessa's abuse, had reached out to apologize for his inaction. After much reflection, Jasmine had offered him a second chance, on the condition that he help train other employees on bystander intervention. As mother and daughter carried boxes to Zara's dorm room, Jasmine noticed a familiar tension in her daughter's shoulders. "What's on your mind?" she asked gently. Zara placed a box on her bed before responding. "I'm speaking at that airline industry conference next week. I'm nervous about facing so many people from the same company that tried to destroy us." Jasmine adjusted her daughter's hat affectionately. "You don't have to do it if you're not ready." Zara shook her head firmly. "No, I need to do this. My voice matters in this conversation. She hesitated. "I guess I'm still angry sometimes, at how easily they were willing to throw away my future My freedom. Just to get at you." Jasmine nodded in understanding. "The anger is valid. Use it as fuel for change, not as a weight that holds you back." Those words had become something of a mantra between them, a way of acknowledging pain while refusing to be defined by it. 1 week later, Zara stood at a podium before hundreds of airline executives, industry regulators, and corporate leaders. Wearing her replacement designer hat as a symbol of resilience, she surveyed the audience with calm confidence that belied her youth. "6 months ago," she began, "I was handcuffed in an airport detention room facing federal charges and the prospect of 20 years in prison. My crime? Flying while black in first class." The room fell silent, uncomfortable with the direct confrontation of racism that many preferred to discuss in abstract terms. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident of one biased flight attendant," Zara continued. "It was the product of systems and cultures that normalize discrimination and protect those who practice it." She detailed her experience without flinching from the painful aspects, her clear voice growing stronger with each word. "The problem isn't just individual racists. It's environments where racism is tacitly accepted, where speaking up feels more dangerous than staying silent." As Zara concluded her speech, she acknowledged the progress that had been made while emphasizing how much work remained. "Trans-global airlines is changing, and I'm proud of my mother's leadership in that transformation. But sustainable change requires more than policies and training. It requires a fundamental shift in how we see each other's humanity." The audience rose in a standing ovation, moved by her eloquence and moral clarity. In the front row, Jasmine Richardson watched her daughter with tears of pride glistening in her eyes. The path forward wouldn't be easy for either of them. Corporate racism hadn't disappeared with Charles Whitmore's arrest, and there would be other battles to fight, other systems to challenge. But in that moment, watching her daughter stand tall in her new hat, speaking truth to power without flinching, Jasmine knew that they had already won the most important victory. They had refused to be silenced, refused to accept injustice as inevitable, and in doing so, had begun to transform their personal trauma into lasting change for others. As the applause continued, mother and daughter exchanged a look of profound understanding. Their journey had only just begun. This powerful story illuminates several critical truths about racism in America. First, it reveals how discrimination doesn't disappear with wealth or status. Zara faced prejudice despite her mother's position as CEO, showing that racism transcends socioeconomic boundaries. Second, it exposes how systems can be weaponized against people of color, with institutions like airport security and corporate structures becoming tools of oppression when prejudice runs unchecked. The story also highlights the vital importance of documentation and witnesses. Margaret's video evidence and Marcus's testimony were crucial in establishing truth against a coordinated attempt to create a false narrative. Without these records, Zara might have faced serious legal consequences despite her innocence. Perhaps most importantly, this story demonstrates the difference between individual and systemic racism. While Vanessa's actions were deplorable, the real danger came from the systemic support that enabled and protected her behavior. From Trevor's silent complicity, to Jackson's deliberate manipulation of procedures, to Charles's executive-level orchestration. Finally, we see that meaningful change requires both personal courage and institutional transformation. Zara's decision to study law and speak publicly about her experience represents individual activism, while TransGlobal's implementation of anti-racism training and oversight committees represents the necessary systemic changes. True justice demands both approaches working in tandem. The strength displayed by both Jasmine and Zara reminds us that fighting racism requires resilience, strategic thinking, and the courage to speak truth to power, even when, especially when, the consequences are severe. Has a moment of discrimination ever changed the course of your life, as it did for Zara? Comment below with your experiences or thoughts on how we can better address racial discrimination in everyday spaces. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that shine a light on injustice and the strength it takes to overcome it. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the reality of racism in supposedly post-racial America. Together, We can create spaces where no one has to fear being criminalized simply for existing in places where others don't expect to see them. Thank you for watching, and remember, in the fight against systemic racism, your voice, your witness, and your courage matter more than you know.